Good afternoon, everyone. It is now noon, so we'll go ahead and get started with our program. It's great to see some new faces to our Lunch and Learn crowd here today. For those of you who don't know, I'm the marketing manager here. My name is Karen Crow, and it's with great pleasure that we welcome you here to Memorial Hall today. This afternoon, Tracy Craven, our instructional technology manager, will be talking all about Google Analytics and what insights you can glean from that data. So I'll turn it over to Tracy. Hold your questions till the end. I'll be walking around with the microphone so that everyone can hear your questions as well as Tracy's answers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. I will start off by apologizing if I cough a little bit too much. I've been dealing with a little sickness a few weeks, but I've got some water up here, so we will power through and get through the presentation. So if I cough too loudly in the mic, I apologize for that. But we're going to talk a little bit about Google Analytics this afternoon. Hopefully it's something you're a little bit familiar with, kind of have an idea of what it is. If not, we're going to talk about that if you've never heard of it before. But we run Google Analytics on all of our websites here at the center and have for, gosh, as long as I can remember, 10, 12 years or so. So we've got tons of data on analytics and our web traffic. So we'll just kind of start off with the basics of what is analytics. It's pretty much a service. It is free, offered through Google that will give you detailed statistics, on your website traffic sources, which is where people are coming from, and can measure conversions for you. And we'll talk a little bit deeper into kind of what those are down the road. I did have some handouts up here on the front table of this PowerPoint because some of the slides I have on here, the text is a little tiny, but I wanted to make sure you guys got all the information. So I did print those off, and we have those. If you didn't get one on your way in, feel free to get one on your way out. So if some of these pop up and you're like, I can't read that, hopefully you've got a PowerPoint and can take notes on there. So sorry I didn't mention that at the beginning. So a couple of things to kind of let you know about analytics. You know, it's a tool for website performance, which means it's not 100% specific. It's a guide on what is happening on your site. So when I say it's not specific, that means the data on there are different factors that could affect that traffic and the people that you're seeing as far as your visits and your users. So we can't take it as like a yes, one-on-one, but it gives you kind of that general information to be able to see some of your traffic sources and what's going on with your site. And it uses a tracking cookie to follow someone through the site. So that's all happening in the background as you go to different websites. I'm sure you've been to different e-commerce sites where you've looked at a pair of shoes and then that pair of shoes just starts following you all over the place. That is a cookie. Google Analytics is doing the same thing, but it is pulling information about where you're located, what you're doing, what kind of browser you have, and different things like that. This is what a tracking code looks like that is on the website. Excuse me. As you can see, let me see if I can get this to work. This little dot, that's where our specific code would be. I took it out just so there wouldn't be any confusion there. But if you don't manage your web presence, you need to talk to whomever does to make sure that this tracking code is on your site. And it'll be specific to your different departments. This must be placed as the first item past the head tag. So if you don't know a whole lot about code, this is some of the background of the website. But if it is not the first thing after the initial header tag, it will not track some of your information. This actually happened to us maybe about a month or two ago. We had a website we were tracking and we were like, the data just didn't look right, but we couldn't figure out what was really going on with it. So this is kind of a fairly recent thing. And we started digging into it, trying to figure out what was wrong with it, and realized that we didn't have our code in the right place. And so we fixed that now. We've gone through all of our sites to make sure it's updated and is correct. So just make sure that's super important that you have it as that first item after the head tag. So what is it going to tell you? It's kind of the who, what, when, where, and how kind of things of your website. So who came to your site? What did they do while they were on your site? When did they visit? We also get real-time information from this. Where were they when they visited your site, and how did they find you? So where did they come from, and how did they get to your page? And we'll kind of dive into this a little bit more on some of the specifics that you can look at that answer these questions for you. So there are 5 main categories within analytics. Let me get some water. So when you log into analytics, these are the 5 categories that you'll see. The first one is real time, which is going to be showing you everything that's currently happening at that exact moment on your website. Who's on your page, it's going to give you the geography of that. It's going to tell you what browser they're on. It's going to tell you how many people are currently on there. Audience is going to tell you information about the people visiting your site over a period of time. And you can set the period of time. There is a date field at the top. So if you want to look at the entire year, if you want to look at a month, you want to look at a week, you can do all of that. But this is going to tell you geography, it's going to tell you demographics, it's going to tell you a lot of different information about the people who are on your site. Your acquisitions are going to be how they got to your site. So are they coming through a campaign? And we'll talk more about campaigns here in a little bit. Did they get referred to your site? Did they directly come to your site? Did they come from a search engine, possibly? Behavior is going to be what they did while they were on your site. What pages did they visit? Did they bounce around? Did they exit your bounce rate? We'll talk about bounce rate a little bit here in a minute. So that's all going to be happening on the behaviors. And then you'll have conversions, which delve into goals, which gets a little bit more deep in there. And so that gets kind of, one thing I meant to mention at the beginning, I'll go back just a little bit. We will not get to everything because there is way more data and analytics than you could ever imagine. And so we're just kind of taking the 10,000 foot look at analytics today. So there are 2 main things you really need to understand when looking at analytics. One of them is metrics, the other is dimensions. So metrics are going to be that quantitative measure, and the measure of sessions would be a metric that you have on your site. You could look at page versus sessions to get an average number. Those are metrics. Then to get a better description of those is your dimensions. So this could be such as city, where does someone come from? Well, that's going to be a property of the metric. You could be a destination page of a URL. So those are going to be more specifics to the metrics. So, and another way you can look at these is the way they're organized within analytics. And we're going to look at some screenshots of analytics here in a little bit. But your dimensions are going to be the rows within your tables, and the metrics are going to be the columns. So this is just a small example here of the dimension here with city. So you have San Francisco and Berlin, and your metrics were your sessions and your pages versus session average there. So this is sometimes a little confusing to understand, but these are going to be your different basic terminologies. So here's some examples of different metrics versus dimensions, and this is just a small amount of them that you can look at within analytics. So you can look at a metric of page views, or your bounces, your exits, goal completions if you wanted to, time for the page to load. And then some dimensions would be, medium sources of the landing page. City, we do a lot of geographic data that we look at, so city or state, the browser someone's using, or maybe even their service provider. Sorry. So one thing to talk about is what is a session. A lot of the metrics that you look at are going to be by session. So what does that actually mean? So this is going to be the group of interactions that someone is taking within your site at any given time frame. So on this example, you've got 2 page views in green. Then they did a couple of events. They had a social interaction and transaction. This is a very kind of e-commerce look. For us, it could be they went to your home page, they went to your maybe tuition and fees page, they filled out a request form, or maybe they clicked an event to go to the application. Because you can event track an application off to another domain. So maybe that would be a session that someone completed during a specific time. Okay. So there are 2 things to keep in mind for sessions that can make them change. One user could have multiple sections based off, one thing is time. So if anyone has any inactivity for 30 minutes, their session ends. So if they're sitting on your page and they're reading something and they don't do anything, or they leave and they go cook dinner and they come back later, they're going to be a new session as long as there's no inactivity, or there is no inactivity for 30 minutes, or at midnight. So if someone is on your site at 11:55 p.m. and they're looking around and they branch over that threshold of midnight, they are 2 different sessions. So that kind of goes back to that 100% specific idea, that you could have that single user be 2 different sessions. Another possibility that could adjust this is if you're using campaigns, and we're going to talk a little bit more campaigns here in a little bit, but if you have someone who comes through one campaign, leaves the website, comes back from a different one, that is 2 different sessions. And campaigns are used specifically if you're doing maybe some digital advertising or some emails. You're going to campaign track a lot of that, and I'll explain how that works here in a bit. But if they're coming through 2 different campaigns, they're going to be 2 different sessions. So, am I going too fast? Is everybody good? Okay. Bounce rate, I think, when I work with departments, is probably one of the most confusing things people deal with. But it's one of the most looked at metrics that we have. And what a bounce rate is it is when somebody literally bounces off your page. So they go to your site and they immediately leave. They don't look at any other pages. They don't peruse into different information. They literally bounce right off that page. So, okay, and kind of the rule of thumb for bounce rates is about 26 to 40% is excellent, 41 to 50 is roughly average, 56 to 70 is a little higher than average, but it depends on what your site is doing. And then anything over 70 is usually considered kind of outside of the disappointing range. But I put a caveat to all that because it really depends on what your page's function is. We do a lot of landing pages, and on some of those landing pages, we don't allow the visitor to go anywhere else. They literally only go to the landing page, and if they don't fill out the request form, that's it. So that page should have a high bounce rate. We expect that. If you've got a page that has a lot of text on it that someone needs to be reading, and they're bouncing off of it, or if they're not engaging in your site, that's something to be of alarm and to look into and see maybe the text just isn't making sense, or maybe there's not enough there. Maybe it's just a little bit of text and there's not enough engagement with what's going on that page. So when you look at these numbers, you really have to think about what is the primary function of the pages that you're looking at. This was kind of put in as like, anything that's 26 to 40 is excellent. But maybe not. Just really depends on what you're doing and how you're evaluating that page. All right, so filters are kind of my thing. I really like them. They're very important for you. Yeah, there's a question back there. That'll allow me to get some water.
So for the bounce rate, I just want to be sure I understand. So it's just they go to the site, they go to a page, and then they leave that page, but I don't see anything here where it says how long they're on the page.
It doesn't matter about length of time. It's only the visit. So they visit that page and they immediately leave. So they could stay on that page for half an hour if they wanted to, or 2 days. It doesn't matter. Well, it would go off in 30 minutes, but it's just the single page itself. So, yeah. So filters are really, really important when you're trying to see different information on a page. So it allows you to take out unwanted data or unwanted traffic, or you can search and find different pieces of information. And so I know this is super, super small, and so that's one reason we printed out the handouts for you guys. But when it comes to filters, there's kind of a rule of thumb when it comes to different views that you have within analytics. So you can set up a lot of different views when you go into your account. And there's kind of the rule is to have one view that's completely unfiltered. This is all of your data. That way none of it has any type of, can't think of the word I'm looking for, but pretty much, your do not delete. It's got all of your information. No matter who comes to your site, it's there. The second one is going to be your main view, and that's going to have some filtering to it, especially IP filtering, which we'll talk about next. So this is going to be where you're pulling all of your regular data that you want to see. We have one set up that it is our distance domain. That is our main view. So I can see all of our subdomains that we have within the distance main domain in this view. And then you have a test view. That test view is going to allow you to, one, test your filters, because sometimes they're a little difficult to set up. It's going to allow you to test goals if you want to do that. It's going to allow you to kind of play with the data without messing up your main information. So, excluding an internal IP filter. This is a big thing for me that I really want our departments to do. This will allow you to exclude yourself, because I don't want to be counted when I go to the site, because I go to the site 20 times a day, maybe more, it just depends on what's going on. I don't want to be included in that data, and neither do I want my colleagues to be included in that data. So what we do is, on our domain, all of our sites, we exclude ourselves. So we do that by IP filtering. If you're in charge of your analytics, or you're working with somebody on that, make sure you have this set up, because you're going to skew your data all the time, because you're the ones that are on there all the time. And so you could also do this if you're working with a third-party agency. You could exclude them as well. You just need to ask them what their IP is. So this is our exclusion, 130.18.12, and then the star, because we want to exclude everyone that's in our building. We want to make sure that we're not counted as part of the data. So this is extremely, extremely important. If you're not doing this, talk to your people or do it yourself to get this set up. So it's a good thing. So we're going to look at a little bit of the reports that we get. So we're going to kind of go back to the who, what, when, where, how. So this is an audience report. This is for 2 months on our distance domain. So you can get a breakthrough of the information that you get fairly quickly when you look into analytics. So right when you get in there, you can see how many users you have. You're going to get some of those metrics right off the front, some sessions, some page views, and your new versus returning visitors. Those returning visitors are set up by that cookie that analytics puts on there. So it knows who's come on to your site a second or third time. It's going to track that along the way. Now, if you have a visitor who completely clears their cache, they've lost their cookie, they're a new user. So keep that in mind. Comes back to that 100% specific. If they do something like that, you would have new data on that person. So that's kind of what your audience is going to look like. This is kind of a pages layout, so I can quickly see, this is the bottom half of the previous page you just saw. I can go in here and I can see really quickly what sites are receiving a lot of traffic, what pages are receiving a lot of traffic. Ours are usually our top domains that are going through the system. We're right now running a digital campaign, so I can see that Carnegie's right up there because that's who we're using as far as our digital campaign. And I can get a quick idea of how things are performing across the different rows. So I can see my dimensions. You have page views by each of those individual pages, interests, the bounce rate we talked about earlier. I can see all this right as I log into analytics. And then I can go all the way across. And there's more. This is only the top 10. So I just want to get a quick view of what's happening within the site. So this is a real-time report, so it gives you an idea of what that looks like. I did this, I think, one late afternoon the other day. So I can quickly see the geography, where people are on our site at that specific time, what pages they're looking at. So we had some people on the BSIS site at this time. And it was really interesting pulling this up because one of the links that's on this page is a really old Our People spotlight. And I thought that's really odd because we have at the bottom of our page, we have an Our People, and it's alumni, staff, and students who might be featured on there. And I saw it pop up here and I was like, that's really odd. Like, why is that one popping up? But that was actually an article that I think Nikki wrote on Miss Puerto Rico. And so I don't know if somebody was searching for her and they found this article about her, but she was one of our students a few years ago that popped up. I can see some sources or referrals if we had any at the time, they would be here. But this gives you just some quick data if you want to. I'm kind of a nerd this way. I look at this all the time because I just like to see where people are and what they're looking at with our site. These lines at the top, they move in time. So I can see pretty much the last 30 minutes or so how many people have been on the site and what they're looking at. Okay. Okay. This just gives you a breakdown of the geography. It starts out as the world, so if you're doing some type of specific recruiting, you can look at the world if you wanted to, but I broke it down and did the screenshot for the United States because that's pretty much our primary target. Of course, Mississippi is always our highest, as expected. But we can also see fairly quickly here what our other population areas are that might be showing some interest. And usually we always have a high amount of people in Texas. As y'all know, we have a huge alumni base in Texas as well. And so we did some specific, I can't say that today, targeting in a couple of areas within Texas. And so I can go in and see, if we're doing a marketing effort in Houston, how is Houston performing on a whole? Of course, I'm sure as everybody else has looked at this, Dallas has been going up. It's kind of leveled off now because, we've got that football player there. But we can go in and kind of get an idea of how things are doing in specific geographies based off the marketing that we might be doing in that area. So I work really closely with the marketing unit to kind of see how we're performing over specific time periods. And you can drill this down, to the city, and you can look at metro area if you wanted to as well. And it gives you some basic metrics on that as well. So, one of the things that I look at a lot with my web developer is how we're doing based off devices. I think we've pretty much, for the most part, have gotten all of our sites responsive. There's a couple I've been to lately that are not. If it is not responsive, I can't implore you enough to get your site responsive. As you can see, our mobile traffic is almost identical to our desktop at this point. Sometimes it's higher. And so this is a really good way if you're meeting with somebody, or maybe you have a department head that's like, I'm not real worried about that. The data is here that can tell you if you've got access to this, and see how you're doing. If you have a huge drop rate on mobile devices, maybe there's something not working quite right with your site, and your web developer should be able to look at some of this and be able to see what's going on and what do we need to look at, what we might need to adjust and fix. All right, so we're going to talk briefly about goals. Let me get some water real quick. Okay, goals are hugely important. They help you measure how well your site is fulfilling your target audiences. So it really is what you're trying to find out needs to be set up as a goal. You can create them off a specific activity if you're trying to do a specific conversion. We have a couple of them set up on our site, not nearly enough. I would love to talk with departments about getting more of these, but we have one that a person visited more than 4 pages. That can give us a little idea of engagement on the site. We can if someone made it to our thank you page, which means they filled out a request form. Once they fill that out, they get a thank you page. So we have a goal set up on that thank you page just to be able to track that and see how many we're getting. Because they can always go to the request information page, but do they actually fill it out? So we can set up a goal for that. And there's a lot of other options that are out there to do it. It really is the fundamental component of knowing if your digital analytics measurements are working correctly. So I'd love to talk to departments about this, about different things that we can help you do with your sites, and how to configure those. Sorry. There's just a little bit more there about goals. I won't go too deep into it because it does get a bit difficult to figure out how to set them up. But if you do any type of A/B testing, you can use goals as well for that. All right, so, all right, we're going to jump into, am I going too fast? I feel like I'm going really fast, but I don't really have a lot of time left. We're going to talk a little bit about UTM Codes and Campaigns. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. I know some of you have, because I've worked with you before. But these are extremely important. And a lot of our departments are not doing this. And I know you're not because I can see it. And so I can go in and I can click on your ad, or I can click on your email, and I can see that you don't have these in there. But they're extremely important to determine our rate of return on some of our investments that we're making. And we work really closely with the marketing department here at CDE to have these set up and to make sure we are able to analyze this information. So what is UTM? Have any idea? It's the urchin tracking model. Yay, exciting. Urchin is a way, way old name for analytics. So they've still kept that UTM name for it. But it really allows you to take a link of information and to be able to track it specifically in analytics so that you know that specific person came from that campaign. So I'm sure that makes no sense, but this kind of gives you an idea of what it is. So there are really three main items within a campaign link that you have to have. That's going to be the campaign name. So why are they coming to your site? The source is from where, and the medium is how they got there. So this is two examples of campaign codes that we have used within CDE. So we have a campaign name of Maths 2018. So that goes back to the Master of Arts in Teaching and Secondary, because we have all of our acronyms, which I know you're all used to. We've got the source that it came from. So this was actually a Facebook post. So that specific title means something to us because we know what it is. And then the medium for this was Facebook. And you can make these be really anything you want. It needs to just make sense to you what this is. You will see these if you get some like an e-commerce email from, say, Kroger, and you click on a link within that email. If you look up in the address bar, you're going to start seeing these, and I see them all the time, just because it's something I know to look for. And then this is another one, another example here. This one's actually a link you could click on. You could type this in. We've got a scholarship campaign 2018. The source was a scholarship reminder email, so we know exactly where that was. And then the medium was also Facebook. We have a lot more, not just Facebook. These are just the two that I happen to pull out that are in there. So you're like, I don't know how to write all that. That seems kind of crazy. You don't have to. This is a web address, but you could just type into Google Campaign URL Builder, and you can get to this page right here. So Google makes it super easy for us, as usual. It gives you a page. You just have to fill out. Really, they only require 2 options, but you really need 3 that are in there. You put in the website that you want to send people to. You put in the campaign source, so how are they getting it? And then you got your medium, which we always put in there because we want to make sure we know how they got it. So that could be email, that could be Facebook, that could be a digital ad, it could be any kind of thing you're doing over the web. And then the campaign name. And we have worked really hard, both the tech unit and the marketing unit, specifically Nikki, because she's right here, on working on our campaign names, because that's how they appear in analytics. And so one thing we have changed over this last year is we want to be able, especially for departments, to be able to pull all of your information at one time. So as you saw in the previous example, it was Maths 2018. So we now have our campaign name the same for everything related to that department. So when I look at analytics, I have Maths 2018, then I can go in, I can see a Facebook post, I can see it, if we were doing a digital ad, we're not right now, but I can see an email, I can follow their communication plan, because we link, every link that we have in our communication plans has a UTM code. So I know which ones they're clicking on, and which links are getting the most usage within different links that we're sending out to prospective students. So really kind of think about this as if you might just be starting this process, or you might have been doing it for a while. This is really something we just started doing this past year. It kind of started with another company that we were using before who was doing some digital ad. And they didn't really think about their campaign names, and then we had like 30 campaign names and none of it made sense. And so we were like, what's a better way to do this? And making sure that we were all on the same page what we were trying to do. So as you put in your information into this little form, it puts your generated URL right here. It builds it as you type in, and then you can make it a short link if you want, if you don't want that really long URL. Most of these are usually hidden from the user anyway, depending on what you're doing. Excuse me. All right, so kind of mentioned this already, but just a little bit more deep into what each of these are. So your medium could be social media, so it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever you're doing. Email, we make our specifically MailChimp email because we send out email in different areas, or a display ad. Your campaign source is a little bit more specific that you're putting in there. So excuse me, I misspoke. So the medium would be social media and the source would be Facebook or Twitter. And then it could be specifically to AdWords if you're doing a digital campaign. Then there's a couple other options that are in there. The term and the content really aren't used. We don't use them a lot. If you're doing A/B testing, you might want to use content. Those are more digital AdWords terms there. And then your name. So it just really identifies what you're looking at. And I'll kind of show you what this looks like in analytics. And I know this is super tiny, so hopefully you can see it on your handouts. But these are different campaigns that we had running during our time period. You can see we were running one and it kind of dropped off, and we were running some more as we kept going through time. But like the number 2 is BOMP 2018. So that's one of our programs in geosciences. And we can click on it and we can get a lot of information. The first one here is a digital campaign that we're running. That name was set up by the company. So we know distance education, we can click on it and we can see everything associated with that digital campaign. And we can drill down a little bit more. This one is actually for our MBA program. So I can go in here, since we go ahead and UTM code all of our communication plans, I can see what someone's clicking on within those. So our very first one, it says 1 application checklist. So I know that's for our first our communication plan email, and it's the application checklist. And it has an MC email, so that's a MailChimp email. So you gotta kind of figure out how you want to label some of these things, because you're going to know a little bit better than, we're using our business practices for these, but kind of think about how you set these up. Number 5 is for program link. So 4 is our 4th email in our communication plan. That link is to the program link, and it was sent through the email medium. So have I lost you all? I hope not. So anyway, so what do they tell us? So they really tell us what's working. They tell us what's not working as well. And we can use this knowledge to adjust our strategy. So we can see if there is a link within one of those communication plan emails that we are expecting a lot of people to click on and they're not showing up here, then we need to adjust our strategies. Or if we're seeing something that everyone is clicking on, maybe that's something we want to add to our social media. Or maybe that's something we want to send or put something on one of our websites to highlight if it's something a lot of people are clicking on. So it just gives you a lot more information. So some kind of common mistakes with analytics that I've seen people do over time is one, not even using their analytics account. So if you're not, do it. It's good. It's lots of good data. But there are a lot of people who don't. If you're not filtering your internal users, I know I kind of harped on that a little bit earlier. That is so, so important. Not creating different views. You can create, I think the limit is 50 views within your analytics account. So what we do is we have our main distance view, and then I create subdomain views as well. So I have one for MBA. I have one for all of our distance programs. So I have one for MATS, like we talked about earlier. I have one for all of our new programs. So I can see their specific information, and I can help departments with that. And then data overload. So if you've never been in analytics, and it's the first time you've ever gone in there, it is I'm showing you like this much information because there is like mounds and mounds and mounds of information. And so if you've never been in there or you're really new to this, like take baby steps, because there's so much data in there. You can really get lost and get just like overwhelmed with what's in the system. There's so much. So kind of find out what's important to you. We talked a little bit about goals earlier, but even if you don't have that set up, what's important to you? Is it geography, or is it a specific page within your site? Figure out those things so that you don't get overwhelmed by the entire process. So just some additional things that really don't have time to kind of really jump into, but just kind of want to get your interest into is event tracking. If you have links going outside of your domain, so we do this for our applications. Applications are over in graduate school and undergrad or Banner or wherever they are nowadays. We event track those, so we know how many people are clicking on those, and we are able to find that. You can look at behavior flow, how people go through your site, and be able to see information on that. Demographics and interest are kind of a new thing within analytics. If you're wondering, Google tracks everything you do. Everything you do. And so they know your interest. based off of what all you do within Google, and we're now able to collect that information, but you have to turn it on. So if you haven't turned it on, that's something you need to turn on. We haven't quite figured out how to use that data yet, but we have it. So if you haven't turned it on, make sure you do. And I want to talk a little bit about if you're a department that works with us, how we're getting some of this information to you, because that process has changed this year. If you've been with us for a while, you should have been receiving these really long, like 8-9 page analytics reports that I doubt any of you read, because I don't expect you to, because they were way too long. I didn't even like reading them all that much. But we have changed that process completely this year, and you're getting now a 1-page summary of your website. And if you've never heard of the Google Data Studio, definitely look into it, even if it's outside of analytics. They have really cool stuff that they allow you to use. But this is now provided for all of our business programs, and we can adjust the dates if you've got a specific thing that you want to look at. And what we're providing now is how is your site trending, which channels are driving engagement, what are the top states, and your engagement by age and gender. So it's kind of 4 just kind of top of the line things for you to look at, but it will look like this, and hopefully you guys have seen it already. But we've got a date range at the top, and we're able to track some information, give you your geography right off the bat, so you can see that, your age versus gender, we've got that information now, and your sessions and page views. So if you work with us, you should have seen this already. If you haven't, let me know. Your coordinators have access to this information. I know a lot of them are out today at a work conference, so, but they have access to this and can provide it for you really on any date range that you would like to see. And so this is kind of how we've changed the way we're providing information back to you guys, in hopes that you want to see more. But this at least gets you kind of that top of the line information, kind of the basic stuff, so that you have an idea of how your sites are doing. So, and there, I'm done. Any questions? I know that's a lot to digest. So, we got questions back. I know it's a lot to digest, and we really are like, we're maybe at the 30,000 foot level of this. So, yes.
Being that that using Google Analytics uses tracking cookies, do we need to take into consideration the tracking cookie law? I know that's mostly an EU thing, or European Union, but is that something that we need to consider?
Yeah, I mean, it's like specifically a GDRP kind of thing, the new.
I guess it's just notifying that you go to those websites that'll have like a little message at the bottom saying, "Hey, just so you know, we're using cookies to track." And you have to say okay.
Right.
It's just making sure the user knows that they are being tracked.
Yeah, well, everyone should know they're being tracked. I know they don't, but if you don't know that you're being tracked, no matter where you're going. If you haven't heard about GDRP, it was passed, a few months ago, maybe a year ago now, in Europe, where everybody has to be told that there's a privacy policy and all this stuff. We're still trying to figure out how to work some of that out, especially with our request forms, because the university at this point doesn't have a privacy policy. I'm told they're working on one, and so that is kind of coming down the pipe. At this point, we don't have to tell them for analytics purposes that we're tracking them. At least no one has told me that we need to. So
sure, yeah. But the concern is that you mentioned that you could track so that way people saw your ads when they browse search engines.
Yeah.
Which would imply potentially that you would need to put something like that on your sites.
Yeah,
I didn't know with us being an educational institution if we're maybe excluded from that.
We are not excluded from GDRP.
Sure.
But I don't know that anybody in the States has figured out how to handle it yet.
Sure. I didn't know that. I didn't think that was part of GDRP though. I thought the tracking cookie law is something completely different.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
GDPR is just for international. We only
Right, yeah. So, not that I'm aware of. I gave this presentation last week at UPSIA, which is a continuing education marketing conference, and no one mentioned it there. So, yeah, Dr. Martindale.
You mentioned, I've got like 7 questions, but I'll only ask one. Are you specifically able to track non-CDE sites? In other words, do we have Google Analytics set up for department sites, for example, that are not CDE sites? And do you know?
We are only tracking our CDE sites. Whomever your web developer is, whether that be through ITS or if you have an in-house one, they should be able to set up the tracking code for you. And they may have it set up already. I don't know.
That's my second question, is ITS is our web developer. Of course, we have a department liaison, but do we know if ITS is using Google Analytics? And should I be talking to them saying, hey, where's my studio report?
Yeah, I mean, they should be using analytics, but I don't know that for sure.
Does anybody know?
Yes, they are.
Good. They are, yes. So that's good. So you need to find out how to get access to that information. We have our own in-house web developer, so we're able to kind of get this stuff as we need it, and we don't have to go through ITS. But definitely talk to your ITS folks if you're using them. Other questions? Yes.
So a lot of people now are using ad blocking through extensions or other ways of blocking a domain, such as Google Analytics. So in the case that I go to some website that has Google Analytics and I'm blocking that from tracking me, does that data still get written to the overall thing, or does it get blocked completely?
Well, if you're using an ad blocker, it's not affected at all. There has been some talk about getting away from display advertising because of that. So that's kind of talk in there. If you are blocking it, Google probably has it. There's no doubt about it, because they've got who knows how much data. We may not be seeing it all. A few years ago, they turned off keywords. So, gosh, that was probably, now that I think about it, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We used to get all this keyword data, and it was really great because we could do AdWords purchasing off of that. We could see what are people typing in to get to our site. They turned all of that off, and they put it on there, not provided. And what that was doing is, if you were logged into Gmail, if you were logged into Google Drive or Google Photos or anything Google related, they had that information. They just weren't giving it to us. They just totally turned it off. There's some workarounds to that nowadays, but people have kind of gotten away from it. So I would say Google probably has it, but we just can't see it, more than likely. So that kind of goes back to that it's not 100% specific. It's more of a guide to kind of help you follow through your site. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so speaking from layman's terms, let's say we start analyzing this within departments. I'm with the Department of Art. It's a really small department. I contact ITS. They bring me the data. Tell me what the proper kind of protocol is to start taking steps as we begin looking at the data and seeing what people are clicking on or what they're not clicking on. What would be your next step as to say, okay, we see that these ads aren't working, or these ads are. Is that something we can do internally, or is that something we need to kind of come to you guys and say, work with us, help us develop the proper marketing campaign to start really using this in the proper
Well, if you have
way.
a distance program, we are happy to sit down with you. Either myself or the marketing folks, we are happy to sit down with you and talk about marketing strategies, kind of what your idea is, what we think might work, what might not, and do some testing on that. We've run some A/B testing on our site to see if different things work. I don't know if you've ever been to our site on the weekend, but Apply Now changes to Apply Today because that worked better on the weekends. So we can talk about different things to make your websites run better. If you don't have a distance program, I would suggest kind of finding out what's important to you. Is it important to get a specific, maybe geography? Like you really want students from Birmingham, and that's really important. So following that geographic, what you're doing in those areas, one of the things we've talked about, and we really haven't had time to crunch it, is as we send out recruiters, are we getting higher hits in those areas while they're out on the road? Is that working? Because if we're not, maybe that's not the best strategy we have in a specific area. That's something we've really talked about trying to do, just finding sometimes the time to do that. So really determining, is there a specific page on your site that's really important? Maybe it's that that application page. You want your application page at the top. I think we all do. We want the application page to be at the top because we know that's how we're moving those prospective students down the road and to enrollment. If your application page is at the very bottom, maybe we need to adjust some things there. So kind of just finding what's important for your site. So.
One thing I would encourage from a marketing perspective, especially if you're with a new online program or one that's been in existence for a while, one of the things we've talked about is who is your target audience with almost every program we have. If you are going off of a gut feeling that it is a 39 to 46-year-old male, well, let's look at the data and see if that's accurate on your site visitors. That may be accurate, but then what you learn from that data is that the folks that you thought you would get from the Southeast that fall into those demographic categories, that's not actually true for the geographic categories. So keep that in mind as well. Whatever your gut feeling may be, go to the data and see what it tells you, and then you might be able to identify some trends. One of the campaigns we're running now, I don't know why, Tracy and I have not talked about it. We have had initially we had 3 hits, now we're up to 8 hits in a random town in Oregon. We've not spent any money to advertise in Oregon, and we have 8 web hits on something just totally random. So that's something we'll look into, try to understand why we're getting that kind of web traffic. I mean, we don't care where a student comes from. Obviously, we can promote in-state tuition, and we have great programs that are reputable to someone in any market, but it is kind of odd for us to have traffic from Oregon all of a sudden when we've not put any money into advertising in Oregon. So there's a lot of data that can be analyzed from those perspectives too, whether it's demographic, geographic, interests even. If you're thinking about a digital advertising campaign and the money that's involved with that, maybe you need to look into the interests of the people who are already on your site to know where you want to target them online. Maybe Facebook is not the best medium for you. Maybe it's more news and weather websites, that sort of thing. So think about those kind of options, and we can help you dive through this data. Don't feel like you're out on an island all by yourself. Anytime you want a report pulled, whether it's a different date category or if you want to look at what was the difference in our traffic from 2017 to 2018, we can help you look through that data as well. So any distance program, we can pull different reports, filter them all sorts of different ways, and we're happy to comb through that data with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And even if you don't have a distance program, when you have a question, like email me. I'm happy to help you. Last week when we were at the UPSIA conference, I had somebody ask me, well, how would you set up your UTM code for 2 different magazine ads? You know, and we just talked through that because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody else for it to make sense. And I'm happy to help you with that. I have some cards up here on the table, and there's my email address and phone number. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out because I'm happy to help. And if you are one of our partners, distance program partners, I'm definitely here to help you really with any questions that you have along the way. So any other questions that you might have?
And I'll also point out, if you need help with social media tracking, contact Nikki Harper. If you want to go through Tracy or just find Nikki's information on our website, Nikki can help you with UTM tracking via social to know which post is working, which post is not, which, if it's video that's going to perform better for your audience versus still images or whatever. Get in touch with Nikki for that help as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we work really close together to make sure that we can get as much information back to you guys as possible. So any other questions before we wrap things up? I think we right on time. So I think there's more food back there. If you're still hungry, feel free to get some more. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention before we get out of here, there are some surveys on the table. If you want to take just a second to fill those out for us to provide some great information. And if you're a faculty member, I wanted to mention a couple of Canvas things we have coming because we're super excited about the transition to Canvas. Yay. But we're going to have an open lab time to work with faculty on November 27th. So you're welcome to come over and work with us then. then we're doing 2 webinars in December on the 13th and the 19th, and then another one in January on the 3rd. So you will be receiving a lot of emails about all of those, so feel free to take advantage of those. Kylie Forsythe is our kind of online learning strategist who will be helping with that transition. I'm helping as well with the Canvas change. So I know that's a hot topic on campus, so I wanted to mention that as well. So we really appreciate you guys all coming. Please let me know if you have any other questions, and we're happy to help. So thank you so much.